There's a message in the park. I didn't read it. Can I know it?
No, we don't otherwise.
Sorry, I might have to tighten it up here.
This C section, the judge makes comments about what they could have done to avoid something, but still leaves it pretty.
Oh yeah, never mind. I used to be able to be able to figure that out, shouldn't
I'm good. How about you? I'm pretty okay. Yeah. Anything new? Anything you want to tell me? Okay.
That's the problem.
I think that would be good. I didn't give them out.
This is from
Okay, thumbs up. Okay.
How are you?
as I
I know.
I passed them out to commissioners. Another one. Gary just gave us also.
so
These ones,
On what program?
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Village of Holly's Planning Commission meeting to order for January 22nd, 2020. We all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Could we have roll call, please?
Okonski,
Here.
Christian, Lacey,
Here.
Steele,
Here.
Clark,
Here.
Henderson,
here.
Goldsmith, DeSessa,
Here.
Kinnaman,
Here.
Did either Christian and or Goldsmith call in? Okay. Anybody else hear from them? No. So we please mark those as unexcused. All right, looking at the approval of the agenda, I think we need to make some adjustments to that if we could. Did you want to go it, or you want me to?
You can go ahead since you're
All right, looking at item number 9 being old business.
we'd like to move that to the last item in the agenda for excluding commissioners and staff comments and the bottom line public comments again. And just before the reports, I guess.
So 9 and 10 will be switched.
Well, yeah, you got 10 and 10A or whatever it ends up being. Okay. So if we could do that, please. Yep. Any vote on this? Anybody have any to take a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Did you have a second?
I guess we're doing a second. One second.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, so moved. All right, could I have a volunteer, or excuse me, look at the minutes from November 27th, last year, 2019. Was there anything on there that anybody saw that was in error?
I move we approve the minutes of November 27th.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, so moved. All right, moving on to the statement of purpose. Could I have a volunteer for that, please? All right, all right, here we go. The mission of the Holly Village government in the enhancement of our community quality of life. Our organization strives for quality services, responsive actions to citizens' requests, and a cost-effective government. We promote citizens' participation, proactive decision-making, and environmental quality. Most importantly, we shall always serve the citizens of Holly. The village of Holly will be a prestigious historical village that is a green residential oasis from the city and a center of commerce and activities for the region. All right, now we have a little bit of business to take care of internally here for elections of new officers. Caitlin?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Caitlin Haben. I'm your planning consultant for the Village of Holly. So we're going to look at, for the Planning Commission, of electing 3 different positions. In front of you, I did take from your bylaws those 3 positions, which is chairperson, vice chair, and secretary. So that way you could quickly kind of look over and see what those duties are. I'm going to quickly summarize them. The chairperson's duty is to essentially conduct the meetings. They're the person that is running those meetings. The vice chair, in the capacity that the chairperson is unable to attend the meeting, or there's a conflict of interest or something where they are not able to lead the meeting, they in turn lead the meeting. And then lastly, the secretary, their primary duty is to make sure that they are reviewing and signing those final approved minutes. So the election procedure, the first one is to first do nominations. So you can either do it as a slate or you can do it individually for each of those 3 positions, nominating somebody else on the Planning Commission. This next step, after we have a round of nominations, and you can nominate multiple people for that position during the nomination period, is to then ask those people that were nominated, do they accept that position? So people don't get stuck with secretary. So once they accept those positions, then we'll have an actual vote. If we do have multiple parties or multiple individuals that are interested in the same position, we do have some blank pieces of paper that we can do a silent election or a blind election, so that way, if that's more comfortable for the Planning Commission. So are there any questions about the election process before we open up nominations?
No one has any questions?
Okay.
I guess I'll go first. I would like to nominate either Mr. Henderson or Mr. Clark for chair. And whichever one doesn't want to take chair, either one of them would take vice chair. And then I would like to nominate, I guess, myself as secretary.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay, then I will turn over. Jim, do you want to start? Do you want to accept the position for chair?
I would rather be secretary.
Okay. Mr. Henderson, do you accept the position for
No,
chair?
thank you.
No, thank you. All right. Gary, do you accept the position of secretary?
I'll let you have secretary. I guess from that standpoint, can I nominate myself then for vice chair?
Okay. Do you accept
And
vice
I
chair?
will accept that as vice chair.
Okay.
Chair.
So we can either move forward with electing those two positions, or we can go back to nominations for chair.
Everybody's open here.
I'd like to nominate Kinnaman for chair.
I don't think he can be with being a liaison for the council.
Right.
I'd like to take back my nomination.
Is there anybody, well, I guess we have another face in on the house here. I guess for the record, let's say that Goldsmith and Galen is here, right here. They showed up late.
I didn't hear you.
We just acknowledge that you were here.
Acknowledged our presence in
Hi.
the world.
We're looking for a new chairperson.
Oh.
Mr.
Not
Rakowski,
you.
I was told that Mr. Kinnaman is a voting member of the planning commission and he can take that seat of chair.
Okay, I didn't think that was,
I don't think so, because he's the legislative representative.
Is the planning commission different than other commissions of the village? In other commissions of the village, the council representative, as long as they're a voting member, have chaired, but I would defer to you, of course.
Okay. I don't think that's the case that they can be chair.
Okay.
Well, if we don't have a chair, then the vice chair will take over.
If you would continue as chair, can I take a vice chair? Or not any position at all?
You can take a position. I believe it's primarily chairperson that you cannot take. Yeah, because I do have some planning commissions where they are vice chair.
So what happens if he's vice chair, but then the chair's not here?
Right, then the chair, then he does chair that meeting. If it makes you feel any better, the chairperson, we hold your hand and walk you through all the meetings.
see no one jumping forward, I guess I'll remain chair.
I'll second that.
And then Mr. Kinman for vice chair. Do we want to take a vote on that?
Do you accept?
Sure.
Okay.
And then
And then me as secretary.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
do we need to roll call this or?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Hearing none opposed, I guess that is, are the new positions. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving down the agenda. We have we need to open a motion for opening a public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Public hearing is now open. First item on it is item A. Perfect. Okay. After I read which item it is, then we're going to have a public hearing rule reminder, if we please. The first item on there is consideration of rezoning 111 College Street, parcel number IH 0134327008 from R1B single residential to C zoning for commercial. All right, so as always, and some people, since we don't very many times have people in the audience, rules for the public hearing is to direct everything to the chairperson. Lucky me. You have to come to the podium and state your name and address. You will have 3 minutes to make your comments. The time may not be donated or allocated to other persons. Please do not speak when you are not acknowledged by the chair. If someone has said something you agree with, for the interest of time, we encourage you to still speak, but comment to other or previous individuals described on the same concerns. In other words, don't just keep on repeating the same thing over and over again. You can acknowledge you agree with them and then move on. And lastly, please remember to keep your comments as respectful as possible. Okay? And if anybody needs a copy of the rules while they're standing up there, you can do that. Okay, public hearing is now open for the item agenda A. Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to get up and speak? Hang on a second.
Do they have presentation time later as well?
Pardon me?
Public first.
So point of clarification too, we are doing a timer, so just so you know when those 3 minutes are up, so you'll hear a ringing noise, that's your timer, so we just ask that you kind of round out your comments when you hear that timer. The applicant is here tonight. Did you want them to speak now, just to kind of briefly introduce the topic?
That probably would be best so that someone in the audience can hear something to get clarified before they have their say-so.
Okay, perfect.
Good evening, Kari Cuxey, Vince Iafano, 202 South Saginaw Street. I'm here to talk about the project at 111 College Street. I know there's been a lot of chatter about it. We are very excited about this project. We love this village. I just want to state that we are here for the greater good and probably for the rest of our lives, we hope. And our plan is to repurpose this historical building and bring it back to life, create some beautiful banquet and event spaces, gathering spaces, hopefully do some office in there, as well as some boutique hotel rooms. We're here to answer any questions, or if anybody has any questions from the commission, we're happy to answer those as well. Did I miss anything? Should I add anything?
No, that's a good start.
Okay, perfect. And I do have Bob Donahue here as well, who can comment. He's a consultant on the project. He's helped us along the way because this is a historical building that we would love to see go back, or be a part of the historic district as well.
Question for you from me, at
Yes.
least. On your application, you had in there also events.
Yes, so event venue, banquet space, absolutely.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to get up and speak?
Yes, George Cullis, 601 East Maple Street. As a former member of this planning commission, I think there's only 2 people that are on here when I was here that are still on. That would be Lori Goldsmith and Galen, along with yourself, Mr. Okonski. In 2017, as the township supervisor, I had gone to a planning meeting with Oakland County, and I found out the resources that were available, and I came back as a member of this commission, and the school building at that time was for sale. And I said, we have an opportunity here through a PUD type of format to take some steps as a commission to let people know that may be interested in that building, that there are opportunities for development. We then scheduled a meeting with Oakland County Planning. They brought 2 carloads of people, 8 or 10 people. Mr. Watson was there with us, and they toured the entire building. They went through the whole building, the good parts, the bad parts, and all of it. At their disposal, they have many developers throughout the county that look for projects like this, and we thought it would be a help to move that building and get it sold and get somebody that would do some redevelopment in the building. From that meeting in 2017, the village council then changed one of the ordinances to open the gateway for making that kind of change. The reason I came tonight is I wanted this commission to understand that we had worked on this a few years ago. Now, what you have in front of you tonight is an opportunity to continue that process. At that time, the Oakland County planners went back, and I think, were you not still a part of them back then? I thought you were. You're now down in South Lyon? Yes, okay. So anyway, Bob Donahue was a part of that group, and they went back, and they weren't able to find any developers that would come out here to do things like make it into apartments or senior living. Those were some of the things we were looking at. The feasibility wasn't there. The cost of renovation for the building, the return on the investment weren't there. So those opportunities that we were looking for, they didn't show up. And it wasn't just the people here in Holly looking for it. It was Oakland County and their planning department with several of the people there that know a lot of people, not just countywide, but throughout southeast Michigan. We did have a few people come and look at it, but nothing was produced from that. So now here you are 3 years later with something in front of you that has some challenges, but has some potential for the community as well. So I came tonight because I wanted you to know that history, because I knew there were only a couple people left on the commission from when I was here. And I wanted to make sure that you understood that those are some of the steps that we have already implemented coming forward. So, all right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to come forward? Sir?
Chris Rankine, 217 Coggeshall. I just wanted to bring up the possibility, or that maybe the Planning Commission could explore the idea. I think that the boutique hotel and the event space is a wonderful idea, but I'm not as sold on the idea of changing from residential to commercial, and I wondered if you had already, or if you might in the future, look into the possibility of issuing a special use permit in the order of an indoor commercial recreational facility as opposed to outright rezoning. And that's all.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Ma'am?
Sandy Miller, 525 West Davisburg Road. I don't really live in the area, but I'm concerned about the traffic it's going to create. And in Lake Orion, where I'm from, we didn't listen to any of the planning commission things. We just ignored it. And the traffic is a nightmare over there. And I don't see anywhere to increase the road size here either. And Lake Orion ended up that it's a nightmare to drive through it. And I was also concerned about the noise level for the neighbors. Every Friday and Saturday night, are those neighbors around there going to have to listen to live bands? That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Marie Sturm, 106 College Street. I have two questions, and forgive me, I've not attended these meetings before, so I'm not sure if you can answer, if I have to direct them to the people.
You direct things to
Okay.
myself.
My concern is the event part of it. Where's the parking going to be? How's that going to impact my house in front of that building and the parking in front of it? If I have people visiting on a Saturday night and they have all the parking taken care of, that's a problem. And secondly, if an event, I am hearing through the rumor mill that we're talking a liquor license. If there's a liquor license, I'm very concerned about the people on the road that have had too much to drink and are driving too fast up and down my road. And secondly, I'm concerned about how they're going to maintain them inside the event center. I certainly do not want anyone that has had a bit too much to drink wandering the streets, being a not a nice person, urinating on things, falling in through my gate into my swimming pool, those kinds of things. So I would like answers to those questions about what's the plan for parking and this liquor license if that rumor is true. When do I get the answers? Forgive me, I'm not familiar with this process. How do we get the answers?
The answers don't come from this board to answer your questions directly. The applicant at this time is solely looking to have the zoning changed so they can then move forward to present items to the Planning Commission for their venue and what they plan on doing, and submitting building plans and or remodeling plans for us to then approve and make any adjustments that we see necessary to do so.
So that my questions would be answered in the next step is what I hear you saying.
Those items answered during the planning approval process.
Okay. Then may I ask another question, if my time is not up?
It is, I touched the button.
What will declaring this commercial do? Why are they proposing this instead of leaving it as it is? Or as this gentleman just said, a special permit, special use or whatever? What is the benefit of making that commercial? Why are they asking this committee for that? Thank you.
Yeah, to answer your question on that, simple question is the way it's currently zoned is it doesn't allow them to use the building as they wish to. So it has to be changed in order to allow that type of use.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Hang on, yes.
Just quickly, the applicant can choose when they come back for the deliberation of the planning commission, they can choose to respond to different questions during public comment as well.
Actually, when there was no more people coming up, I was going to ask them to come up and answer any questions they shall choose to answer. Okay?
Hi. Maureen Fitzgerald, 312 Hadley Street. I'm here for a couple people who couldn't be here tonight and asked me to read something on their behalf. One was through a daughter illness in the hospital. The other one stuck in traffic coming home from Detroit. So this is from Angela Boston Wallace at 709 Baird Street in Holly. She says, hello, I cannot be here tonight, but here are some of the reasons I do not want the 111 College Property Zone commercial. One, there is not enough parking for any sizable parties that would be hosted. Parties that could be held here would cause overflow parking into our streets and parking in front of our driveways, just like the neighborhood by the chapel that is owned by the same owners. The residents of Oakland Avenue experience this every weekend they host a wedding. Two, the village and schools have already made agreements with the owners to provide parking. Our tax dollars should not be subsiding their lack of parking on their private business. This is not a practice as we as a village should be taking on or endorsing. 3, if they do offer valet parking, this would be a nightmare for the residents. Valets make money off of fast parking, which means more people not stopping at the stop signs and speeding past current speed limits, which are currently not patrolled by our fantastic officers. 4, children, and this is the part I think that is what brings my concerns to, is my children that live in the area, the streets we ride our bikes on, and the other families I know in the area that I see children running across the street all the time. And yes, the stop signs do get blown constantly. Children are constantly playing and riding bikes in the streets because of the poor condition of the neighborhood sidewalks. Children's lives will be put in danger. 5, how many of the people who are in this commercial zoning live in this neighborhood? I can bet not many. This is a horrible plan for residents and families. 5, they turned down the lady who owned the bed and breakfast who wanted to sell candles in her business because there is not enough parking for that. Yet we are proposing that the intended business bring in hundreds of guests and cars, and somehow that is okay. 6, it is because of who owns the building that we're even entertaining the idea of rezoning. We are trying to please them and not the residents of this neighborhood. We are compromising safety for tax dollars, which are already being paid due to the petitioners already owning the building. You, as well as our neighbors, know this is not beneficial change for the community. I am asking you not to approve these changes to the zoning. That's from Angela. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sir?
I thought it would be appropriate during public comment. Yes, I work for Vincent
Name
Curry.
and address, please.
Robert Donahue, 4875 Comstock Commerce, former county employee. I have 42 years of experience in historic preservation and downtown development. And I would agree that to rezone this property without conditions would be a mistake. And I know that the Planning Commission and the city can't put those conditions on this by law, but I know that the owners could put the conditions upon themselves. And they do want to respect the building's history, to restore the building, to amend the historic district, put it in the historic district. I can't think of my 42 years a developer ever wanting to put a building in a restricted condition. I think that's miraculous. And so I think that the historic preservation of the building, the community's history, is an asset. It's an economic development asset. And I think that the respect for the history of the building is very important to this community. This community has always been a leader in preservation since it first formed the first historic district, or the second historic district in Oakland County. The design, the exterior of the building and all the property will follow state and federal historic preservation guidelines. Yes, it'll be the first time back on the tax roll at maximum capacity. Certainly they're paying a minimum tax now, but to maximize the use of all 40,000 plus square feet would be a tremendous boost. The preservation will stabilize and increase the property values, just not of the property itself, but with the surrounding properties. And in fact, when the property is complete with its restoration, we'll put equity into the surrounding residents and throughout the community. It's very compatible with downtown revitalization, providing a destination for the community. Kari and Vince have always done everything that they've said they would, everything they've been asked to do by the village. And I think that they have already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in this community. In fact, between $1 and $1.5 million, restoring at least a dozen homes according to preservation standards, and 4 historic commercial buildings to historic preservation standards. So I think that the school district is extremely supportive because they are concerned about charter schools, and it could easily have been a charter school. I know that George mentioned the lack of development interest. Historic schools are very difficult projects, and I think you're very lucky to have someone that will respect that building for its future. So again, I think that there are only 2 kinds of people that I ever worked for when I retired from Oakland County. It's those of high integrity, those that come to quality communities, and the other standard is that I only work on historic preservation projects. And so I think this is an outstanding project and will be good for the community.
Sounded like mine. I didn't have it. All right, sir, that was behind that gentleman. Had his hand up, please.
My name is Thomas Clink. I live at 118 College Street, directly across the street from the property, and have so for 24 years. I echo the concerns of those who have already been up here who live directly in the vicinity of the property. Directly across from my house is a bus stop that is on the corner of Baird and College, and we are directly in the walking path of many, many children that return home from school. And we're going to have them potentially walking by a place that has a liquor license that potentially is going to be renting hotel rooms to people who will not be, what's the word I'm looking for? I apologize. Who won't be vetted in any way, shape, or form. We won't be knowing who's coming. We won't know who's coming into our community, who's coming into our neighborhood. The parking is going to be a nightmare unless that is addressed. And one of my vast concerns is that, I mean, you have my apologies, Chair. They have a great reputation for what they've done in Holly so far, and that is appreciated. But now we're doing it in a residential area. And in all honesty, we're doing it across the street from me. And so I have concerns about it. What happens in 3 years if this does not turn out to be a financial boon and this property is sold and it's already been rezoned? Who's going to come in and purchase that property? And are they going to have the same standards and concerns that the current party does for the community? I would just like to hear some sort of contingencies from these folks, hopefully next up, to address the concerns that myself and my neighbors in the College and Baird area have expressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ma'am, in front here.
Hi, how are you? My name is Mary Ray, and I'm at 108 College Street. And I own a bed and breakfast on College Street, right across the street from the school. And when I opened up, everybody says, oh, the traffic was going to be so bad, and everybody was going to, I mean, all kinds of things were happening, you know, and were said when I opened it. But I think it would be a benefit for the area to have a commercial, especially for me, because I can extend some business practices that I was before the board before and I couldn't do it, but now I'd like to do it. If they get a commercial license, I can do it. People that want to start businesses in their own private home, they can do it with a commercial license, or they can apply, and it kind of will benefit them a little bit. So being in business and, you know, having a bed and breakfast and everybody complaining when I first started, I don't hear any complaints now. I don't hear any degenerates coming out of my house or anything. Everybody is really nice. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Sir, that was in the back.
Joe Hutchins, 419 Thomas Street, Holly. I've been here for 50 years. I don't look that old, I hope. But some back history on the old school. It was built in the 20s. I used to live around the corner from there when I first came to Holly. And that school has been everything. It was township offices at one time. It was Pee Wee basketball on weekends. It was our voting precinct. It's been a rec hall. It's been senior citizen center. They used to show movies on the outside of the building in the summertime. There seems to be enough parking there. I would also consider maybe, you know, the restrictions that they want to impose on themselves. But tonight we're here to turn it to commercial. That's been a school, it's been a church, it's been everything. And the old saying is, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's a duck. I mean, that's not a single family dwelling there. I don't care how rich you are, but and it's one of the best buildings in town, one of the very few best buildings in town. And this is the best it's looked in the 50 years I've been here. So that's my comment for that, and I'd like to see some restrictions on it. Let them impose their own thing, but that'd be the next meeting of the Planning Commission. Tonight is we're looking at commercial. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Amy Ray at 108 College Street. I'm Mary's daughter. And so I actually reside also at the bed and breakfast. I haven't lived in the area all that long, but I'm a resident at this time and for the past year or so. And I've heard nothing but amazing things about what Vince and Kari have done for this area and the amount of dedication and revenue that I'm sure has multiplied beneficial, this area, not just for the people of Holly, but those coming here. I'm sure there are innumerable benefits. My mom doesn't have a liquor license, and just to reiterate and kind of back up that, she's had hundreds of people stay, and many people don't even really realize that because of the care. People aren't necessarily, I would say, like vetted, but the types of folks that are coming to Holly, who are going to the Holly Hotel for dinner, the comedy club, to weddings at Vincent Kari's benefit, those are the folks who are able to then the next day, because they're staying at my mom's bed and breakfast, spend more money. There has not been anything really negative. We haven't heard anything negative about our bed and breakfast or the people who stay here. They bring their own champagne because they come for birthdays, anniversaries, all of these different things. So it seems to me that it would just be a benefit. There are concerns about traffic and parking. I feel better if a building is not vacant and is getting attention and concern and care for people, from a historic standpoint, and that there's a controlled process for establishing and focusing attention on this. So it's win-win, I think, for a lot of people, and I think my mom's business has already established that the interest in Holly as a destination from people from Macomb who think we're up north because we're past the Jesus sign. You know, I'm just saying this place is growing, and it's better to have concerned, caring citizens who are abiding by your rules and by community standards to help that growth rather than leave the building vacant and have terrible things happening. So I support it.
Thank you. Sir, that was coming up.
Hi, my name's Robert Hillman, 6053 Great Lakes Drive. I've been born and raised here, third generation family business. I've done some work for both of them. They gave me the honor of putting the new roof on it. I would love to see it go in. I can understand concerns of this could happen and that can happen. I mean, anything can happen, but I think positive change with, you know, positive people behind it is a recipe for something that we could all use in our community. And with the background they have, I don't see any reason why not. I mean, we're talking about good people who are going to do good things. We're not talking about a live venue for concerts or nothing like that. The building is outfitted with an auditorium and a cafeteria. It's outfitted to house 500-600 people. It has an enormous parking lot. So as far as some of those issues, I think the answer is in the building itself. I've walked through it, I've seen it. There's a lot of potential there. And I hope to see it work out for them. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Suzanne Heipel, 210 East Maple. Did you call me ma'am?
I did.
I'm going to say I've been where you are. I know the decision process and the discernment that is necessary in making decisions like this. And I wanted to be here to tell you that I want you to make sure you put as much emphasis and concern on the positive aspects and the benefits of this project as some of the negative that has been presented. I really like Mary and her daughter, their positive and their support for this. I'm going to say that some of these same concerns were raised when we talked about the wedding barn in Holly Hills and for her bed and breakfast. And I've heard nothing but good things coming from that. So I'm hoping that the positivity and the opportunity for this to happen, for someone to just come and offer to restore the building and provide jobs, and I think it's all good. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi. Amy Hillman, 6053 Great Lakes Drive. I'm the Code Enforcement Officer for Holly Township and the Assistant to the Supervisor. In 2016, I actually was invited to sit on the Blight Task Force for the Village of Holly. And this was actually one of the properties that we discussed, how to get people in there. And actually taking care of vacant properties is one of my prime focuses for the township. So we've been lucky enough to have someone come in and not only invest in one building, just as Mr. Donahue said, I agree with everything that he said, but we do have to remember that they're not just business owners and they're not just property owners, they're actually residents of our village here. So we can, I would say, trust in the fact that they want the best for our community as well. It's not only going to benefit them, but it benefit their child, their children, and our community, our children as well. And it will reflect within the economic development. Allowing for rezoning is going to allow them to move forward. And obviously, we have farther processes ahead of us. However, when it is reassessed, the tax base is only going to increase. So allowing that is going to allow further economic development. I think that we can trust in what Vince and Kari have presented, and I believe that any concerns moving forward that they would be able to address, being that they're not novice business owners. These are experienced business owners that have opened a plethora of different businesses throughout their time and here in Holly. They are invested not only in their own residents, but in the economic development of our community. And I think that it would behoove of the council or of the commission to go ahead and approve the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Back there, I had somebody getting ready to come up. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Kym Carter. I live at 907 Academy Road. Am I allowed to speak if I don't live in the village?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to speak. I moved here in 2013, and I purchased a home that was a flip, and I love it because they kept the integrity of the building. They kept the plaster walls, the curved ceilings, the original hard floors. And I believe that watching our community grow as it has, since these two have arrived, they've not only invested their money, they've invested their life. They've become a part of our community. And I'm a huge advocate of this. I want to help and support the growth of Holly as much as possible. Before they arrived, I was contemplating moving. Since they've arrived, I'm staying. And the reason I'm staying is, even though I'm not in the village, their financial investment is my gain. My property value will eventually go up, as will everybody's. Not only that, but it is such a drawing card. To have such professionals, we're blessed to have them in our community. And what a beautiful location that we have to have this. The access that we have, 15 minutes to 75, 15 minutes to 23, is going to bring more people in, which means more revenue, which means more businesses are going to want to come in, and Holly's going to thrive. This happened in Royal Oak. Not that this is going to be a Royal Oak, because we're counting on you all to make sure that it maintains that hometown feeling, but make it exceptional. And I believe that we do have on our hands a gift. And I am so in favor of what they are doing. As far as leaving the building as is, what does that attract? Rodents, teenagers hanging out, building, disintegrating, squatters, as opposed to bringing in more revenue, making it attractive, being a healthy part of the community. And it's going to change. Time doesn't stand for anybody. And we can either embrace the change or we can butt the change. But it's going to change. Things don't stay the way it is. That building's not going to just sit there by itself and just be nothing. I think this is a great opportunity for us, and I hope that you will consider that fully, that, again, these are trained, these are professionals at what they do. Thank you.
Anyone else? If no one else is coming up, I have a item that was sent to me by email from a resident that he wished me to read. And sorry about that. I guess I will hit the highlights. One, he says, Holly has already a problem with spot zoning in neighborhoods due to the industry around the railroad tracks. Ask yourself if further commercial use are what we are trying to encourage within our neighborhood streets. Rezoning without strong restrictions would be reckless. The law allows for conditional zoning that would transfer with the title and land when it sells. These restrictions could include limiting the types of business that are allowed in the property, hours of operation, and other restrictions that would allow the village to retain some control over the future uses of the property. If you change your property to strictly commercial without restrictions, we may end up with something nobody wants. Allowing any alcohol sales or distribution on this property would be dangerous and against any sort of common sense. People believing in the neighborhood, or people living in the neighborhood by a school building where alcohol was never allowed should be able to continue to enjoy the same peaceful and safe quality of life if they have been there for decades. While it is considered acceptable for bars and other alcohol outlets to be commercial districts, to put them in a neighborhood filled with families and children and was not part of our master plan. I was involved when I sat on the village planning, protecting health, safety, and welfare. The quality of life and taxpayer residents need to be the priority of this commission. He goes on to say that he was the planning for the township, which now he has resigned his position, but that for the planning commission to take serious consideration on anything that we may move forward with. And that was for Tony Egbert. Okay. Anyone else? Would the property owners like to come back up and answer any questions that they heard?
Yes. So appreciate all of the positives, positive comments rather, and of course the questions and opposition as well. I'd love to address parking and of course alcohol. And in front of you, you have a parking lot agreement from the Holly area schools. I believe everyone was given that. Yes. And for everyone, our plan was to handle the parking situation was to utilize valet parking and to utilize, Vince and I have been looking at a trolley / shuttle that we would purchase and then utilize that shuttle to park at the Carl Richter Center here. I believe there's 800 parking spaces here. Is that correct? Something along 800. There's a lot. There's a vast amount. We also have 75 spaces at the building at 111 College Street. So utilizing valet parking there when you're doing it in-house valet, you can park quite a few cars in the lot there. So that would address the parking situation. We're very conscientious about this being a residential neighborhood and the quiet living aspect of living in a residential neighborhood. We would, of course, adhere to any noise ordinance, which is 11 p.m. here in Holly, in the village of Holly. We already adhere to that at the vault. Currently.
Most of the weddings, I think, are over at 10? So
11.
All right,
11.
Okay.
11's the latest, typically. And in terms of the alcohol distribution, consumption, we have a liquor license at 202 South Saginaw, and which entail you can apply to have alcohol catering license, which we do have. So an alcohol catering license would be used at 111 College Street. Anyone who dispenses alcohol in any of our facilities is Michigan tip certified, which means they have to go through a special training in order to even be a bartender, serve, handle, and be around alcohol rather than handle it. And we're always conscientious of this. Weddings are a huge celebration, and people like to have a good time. Most of the time, these folks who are having a wedding event have a hotel block. We utilize Fenton, the Fairfield Inn, and Grand Blanc, and then, of course, in Fenton, and they're doing shuttles to those hotel rooms. So we're always conscientious of us. We're in the downtown is surrounded by residential, so we're always very conscientious about folks and guests being overserved.
I don't think we've ever had one incident at the vault. So
better knock on wood.
Yes, right.
Don't jinx that. But those are the two biggest concerns. I think the other thing that we would like to address is the school stop, brain fart. Bus stop, jeez. It's been a long day. The bus stop and the concerns about that. I know our events are typically Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. They're not Monday through Friday unless it would be some corporate gathering during the day. But it may be in the best benefit to move that bus stop. I'm not opposed to having the bus stop there. I'm just saying it might be something if the residents have a concern about children coming through, because they do. They cut through the parking lot and come in front of the building. That's where the bus stops, so of course they would do that. But that may be something that needs to be addressed. What else did I want to address? What am I forgetting?
It's alcohol and parking.
And the comment about the valet parking, we would utilize one company for all of the events. We would have complete control over that valet parking, because I do understand how those valet parkers can be a little rambunctious, I will say, but that can certainly be addressed and controlled. Okay, good.
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. With that said, for everybody to sit there and stew on, and the commission's here to stew on, we will now move on to item B, considering the zoning ordinance amendment. These are amendments that are changing on our actual zoning ordinances. That's part of the public hearing also. It's a separate issue, yeah. We won't get down to the consideration until we get down to new business.
I suppose it depends on if that motion was made for.
Or just public hearing.
Or just open public
Right.
hearing.
All right, so what's in front of us now is a text amendment to the ordinance. There are several of them on the docket. They were items where we are cleaning up our ordinances to make them a little more understandable and easier for people to basically read through the docket and see what's needed. So the items that were in our agenda, all right. Does anyone have any comments? These were items we talked about prior. So if there's nothing on here then to, where everybody's looked through those and the verbiage was all what we talked about, correct? Okay. So from that standpoint, I guess I had one. No, that was, this stuff.
No, this is a new thing.
Correct.
No. That is not what the public hearing is for, is it?
Yes. Yes. It's also in the public hearing.
No.
You did put the notice out for it.
I don't think that was, thought we were gonna review that before it went to public hearing.
Yeah, that was back in November, so I don't know if we can check the minutes real quick that you just approved. That motion would have been in there to hold the public hearing for that item.
Because we hadn't seen it.
See, it's on the,
We just crafted it.
It's just a review, it's not that ordinance.
so we need to amend the agenda to take item B off public hearing then.
Because we haven't looked at that item yet.
The donation bin stuff? Yeah.
It's not-
This is the first time we're presenting on it. It was sent at the meeting that got canceled.
Right. Let me review it. They haven't got a chance to make their changes to it.
Sorry for the confusion here, people.
This is the first draft.
Yeah, this is first draft on that.
Gary, I do have written down in my notes that it says public hearing, next regular planning commission meeting, and that was on November 27th, our meeting. I do have
Right,
that
that's
written
what I thought the notes were taken as. I do realize this is the first time we've seen the drafts of it, so that's why I was asking the commission if everything that was in there is what we talked about, or if they saw something that was different than what we discussed to have the text amendments made.
So because it was in the minutes for having that public hearing, it was published accordingly. I would recommend we still have that public hearing, just to hold that formally. Granted, that doesn't mean you have to make a decision on it tonight if you're not comfortable.
Okay. From that
It's on
standpoint.
here, it's in the minutes.
It's in the minutes.
From that standpoint, if there's anyone in the audience that were concerned about the amended text for the ordinances, again, recognize to stand up and come to the chair to talk about any items that were going to be amended in the ordinance, if you had any concerns about the amendments. Well, it was in the notice. This is the.
There was a motion by Clark, a second by Kinnaman.
Yes.
To move storage containers text amendment to public hearing from planning commission next month. Motion carried.
Storage containers is
And-
not this. storage containers is the containers.
Right, but
not-
we made amendments to the ordinances for,
But this is donation bins.
that's just one page of it.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, that was just one.
And that was also regarding the,
Okay.
central business district, short-term
Yes,
rental.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
With that said, is there anyone in the audience that read this and would like to comment? Okay, so, from that standpoint, no one got up and spoke, so let's close the public.
I move we close the public hearing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Okay, public hearing is now closed. Now, we have an open area for public comments. Public comments are for items that are, anything you'd like to talk about, not necessarily what we just talked about, but anything else in the village that you would like to bring before the commission to, be aware of.
Can you talk about something that was just talked about?
If you want to ask a question regarding that, you may, yes.
I'm Sandy Miller at 525 West Davisburg. And when I say I'm concerned with the traffic of this, so we're talking about another 250 plus cars coming into Holly every Friday, Saturday night for these weddings. Isn't that going to make traffic on these roads a bit iffy?
I guess I'd like to understand where you're coming up with 250 cars.
Well, they said it's 400 for the venue, right?
I don't believe they ever said that. I believe that was made in public comment. Somebody,
400 people?
They can have 400 people at the,
The young man in the back corner made that comment that he'd been through the building and that it could hold, but I don't believe that was any sort of official.
okay, well, I'm just saying, I hope that you take into consideration whatever the amount is for the venue, how many cars are gonna be going through Holly to go to the venue every Friday and Saturday? And what kind of traffic problems is that gonna cause for the residents of Holly? That's all I'm saying.
All right, thank you. Any other person with public comment? All right, let's go on then to, we moved old business down at the bottom, so on to new business, the consideration of the rezoning. Sir?
Yes. Over the years, churches and schools have always been permitted in residential areas, and I think we all understand the reasons why we have those in the neighborhood. The building in question here, part of it at least, I think, is over 100 years old. It seems to be structurally sound, and it's something that I think should be saved, even though it hasn't been used productively for quite a while. Changing the zoning, I see as a problem in a number of areas. One is it's spot zoning. Not long ago, we turned down a request for commercial zoning across the street because it was spot zoning. If planning commissions get into spot zoning, you pretty much invalidate your zoning ordinance and the ability to enforce it. It's very important. Spot zoning is a very, very poor practice, and zoning runs with the land. Everything that's said tonight about what's proposed could go out the window, and if this property is rezoned commercial, any commercial use can go in there without question. And that's something I think we need to seriously consider. We can be subject to litigation if we engage in spot zoning. And I believe that the request to rezone this commercial should be denied. However, there is an alternative. something called planned unit development, or for short PUD, is rarely used in small towns. The only time it's ever been used in Holly, to the best of my benefit, is out at Mill Point. The intent of that, and I'll read you the first paragraph out of page 22 of our zoning ordinance. It says, the intent of a PUD district is to permit flexibility in the regulations for development of that either includes a mix of land uses or proposed for a site that contains unique natural or historic features which the developer and the village desire to preserve. The standards for this section are intended to encourage innovative design and create opportunities that may not be obtainable through more rigid standards in a single zoning district. Basically, what you're looking at is you're negotiating a special use for the property, which I think gives the village more power to control what happens in this residential neighborhood, and I think that's what we should be doing. You know, there's 14 listed possible criteria for PUDs. This would meet several of them, not all 14, but it would meet several. And I believe the Planning Commission can recommend to the Village Council that we move in the direction of a PUD to use this building productively in the future.
Okay, thank you. One item on to your statement, it does not meet the criteria for land.
Right. That's one of 14 criteria, and it does not say in the ordinance that you have to meet all 14 in order to qualify for a PUD. I spoke briefly to an attorney last night, and he said it can be done, but it's rarely done in a small community. But you know, that's up to this body. I've given you my stand.
Right. All right, so with that said, all right, what's before us now is consideration of this. This is why we're going to have discussion on the board where everybody can weigh in on their 2 cents with what they like to do. The other thing that I guess I'll start off, the concerns that many of you have mentioned regarding the parking, the noise, people being outside roaming around, event hours, things of those natures, all right? A lot of that we can control, and we can control uses by the applicant coming before us as a conditional zoning request for the commercial district. There we can then work with the applicant, but primarily control and shape it the way we want to shape it. As coming forward with just strictly as commercial, we are looking at the possibility of just approving commercial or denying commercial. We do not have the ability to put conditions on it at this point. From that standpoint, another item, and there again, this is something I'm saying that I believe is true. I can't swear it is true. The agreement that was drafted for Holly L overflow parking and Carl Richter campus. I guess from the standpoint of concern, I do not believe it was signed by Mr. Roper, which is the school superintendent.
It is.
It is.
All right. However, to my knowledge, he does not have the authority to do so. It has to go before the board, and the board then must submit a resolution so that when Mr. Roper is gone, it's a resolution of the board and then a formal agreement. And also their stipulation had in there that the school could cancel within a 30-day notice. Well, that doesn't leave us as a commission board any warm fuzzy feeling that parking is available then for the events. So those are concerns I had in that area. Again, if we moved forward or would be able to go forward as a conditional, I think we could draft things and look at ways of controlling movements, controlling noise, various items that I think we could just work with the applicant on to make it good for the community and to make it good for the applicant. That's my 2 cents.
If I could make 2 more points here. One is that our current master plan and the past master plan have not shown this kind of use for this property. And I think it's important to note tonight that I think on January 29th, we have a meeting as we're rewriting the master plan. And I think it's important to have an updated master plan and to try to do everything humanly possible to adhere to it. Thank you.
I'd like to comment towards that, because that was one of my biggest concerns initially was, you know, going against the master plan. That's a slippery slope, and then what's the point of said master plan? And I drove around this property, which I've driven by it several times, but I actually paid attention, you know. I said, well, this is not a single-family dwelling. Never has been, never will be. No matter what we decide tonight, that will never be a single-family area. It's this monolith that is going to, it's either going to be nothing, or it's going to serve some sort of people are going to come there. You know, if it ever does become something, there's going to be the traffic issues, the people. But what do you do with it? Do we sit back and wait for somebody to come in and say, here, I'm going to shell out an ungodly amount of money to buy this block, knock all of this down, and put up single-family homes? You know, we know that that's not going to happen. So it's kind of one of those special circumstances where, yeah, it falls into this area. We want this to be, you know, low-density single-family homes, but this pre-existing area right here is never going to adhere to that, no matter what color we make it on the map. So that, man, I guess that's what I have to say to it.
One other thing I would point out is, I think somebody mentioned there's 40,000 square feet there. It's a very large building. You can reasonably expect that there will be multiple uses within that building. It's a very complex situation, and one we need to consider very, very carefully.
I feel like this building, I remember from when I was a kid, there was night school in there. My kids went to summer kids. That was their babysitter in the summertime. It was a hub. All of the offices, the accounting offices were in there. Remember Dan Rolls? Our credit union, Metro North Credit Union, was in that building in a closet with a giant safe, and Margaret sitting behind the desk with chairs outside the door where you had to sit and wait to go in and make your deposit. It was a very busy place. It was where we voted. Talk about traffic and people. Do you remember the lines streaming through all of the hallways, out the door, around the building, down the sidewalk? When I go into there, I think to myself, wow, these people have been enjoying some peace and quiet, but that's not the nature of that space. The nature of that space is something. And I really am entertained by this idea of the rooms and the boutiques, and I just don't see it as a big crazy party every night, or, you know, they're doing it respectfully. 11 o'clock, for crying out loud. I do not want to have a wedding here. No. I like to stay up a little later, but I think moving into that neighborhood, I would say, wow, I wonder what this is going to be someday, because it's not going to always be vacant or just a church that's letting it deteriorate. It was a busy, busy place, and I really would like to see it busy again. The parking on the streets was horrible. You'd had to walk a couple of blocks to get into Margaret, you know. So,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think it's, you know, it's kind of human nature to fear change, and you start going down the path of what's the worst possible scenario. You know, next thing you know, we've got, you know, people saying there's going to be keg stands and they're going to be throwing lawn darts, and everybody, you know, whether that's going to be the reality, I doubt it. That's really not the point. I mean, personally, knowing what they've done, I don't have any issue with them doing this. The bigger question is, which has been brought up, is what happens down the road if this is zoned, and then, so we don't have these wonderful people owning it anymore. If that were to ever happen, our hands are tied at that point, what do we do? And if there's restrictions, if there's ways to put something in place, then
Agreed.
I'd be for that. I also, I respect the people who live across the street that say, you know, I don't really want this. Respectfully, if I bought a house across the street from a 40,000 square foot vacant building, I don't know that I'd have the right of the expectation of nothing ever happening on that property.
That's what I was trying to say. Thanks, Galen.
I do have a question. This is for Jeremy, since he's the building inspector, fire marshal, light officer. Now, there's been, I've heard, a lot of break-ins.
That is correct.
And vandalism. You had told me that they have put up security cameras.
That's correct, yes.
And have tried to get rid of this. And there was very bad stuff that was going on there that they have gone and, you know, fixed, at least the best they can for right now. Because
That's
it
correct.
still is. Okay. Now, if this was right across from your house, I would like to know, would you want this coming into your neighborhood?
That's a great question, Ms. Lacy, and I appreciate you asking that. But first, I'm going to comment on the first things that you said there.
Okay.
Reported of break-ins and vandalism, and Vince and Curry are here, and they can also agree with that. When they asked me to go through their building a few months ago with Chief McGee, I was taken back by some of the vandalism that I seen in the building. Some of the writings on the walls. There was actually, and excuse my French here, but we're all adults, sex room painted on a large wall of the size of this with arrows pointing down hallways.
Which room was that, Jeremy?
Well,
asking for a friend.
Galen, I'm going to tell you. So I as a inspector and a fire marshal, I definitely wanted to pursue this room and see what was there. So when I did arrive to this said room, I was taken back by the amount of mattresses and furniture that was in this room. So, you know, we talk about our kids in the streets and the sidewalks being safe. But how safe are they when right across the street we're having sex rooms, drug rooms inside this vacant building that has taken place underneath our eyes that we're kind of blind to see. I've seen several reports coming from Holly PD of the vandalism and the activities that have been going on there, which I think a lot of the people maybe are eye-opening to this comment right now of, wow, that was really going on there. So I think, you know, ever since Vincent Curry came in, they've addressed the security issues. They boarded up the windows that they were coming in. They removed the literatures on the walls, and they have placed security cameras, and it's being monitored for fire as well. I think that's a huge asset for the community. Now, you know, if that building were to catch on fire, everybody's house that is in the vicinity of that is in jeopardy of catching on fire as well, just from the spread of convection radiation heat. So that's always been a concern of mine, is keeping that building safe for the community. Now, going to your second part there, Ms. Lacy, with would I like to live there? Well, I wouldn't want to live next to an abandoned building, first of all. Secondly, I would raise my family next to a building of that nature. One, it's historic. It means something to this community, so that means something to me and my family. And talking about the character of the people that are buying it. I've inspected many of their projects, and not once have I had a red tag for structural issues, building issues. They followed the book. They brought in professionals to design and perform the work that needed to be done.
Thank you for being so open about all the things, and with it being, you know, vacant, what has happened. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Do we have enough comments basically from the?
I was just going to say real quick that basically, you know, I had some concerns about the alcohol there and the hours, but the applicants assure us that 11 o'clock is going to be enforced. And it seems like really we're all almost talking about the same thing here. It seems like there's a lot of support for this project. I know there are concerns, but I'm confident that moving forward with this process, and it is an ongoing process, that we'll be able to work out these concerns to everybody's satisfaction. Everybody's concerned with safety, of course, and that's first and foremost. And it looks like we're going to be able to get there. It might mean moving a school bus stop. I'm pretty sure that can be done. I'm not going to speak for the school district, but I think that's doable if it needs to be done. And so I'm all for getting this thing on the tax rolls. Obviously, with an occupied building, it's going to be a much safer situation in that regard instead of a derelict, vacant building. And as I understand it, I'm not sure about this, I heard talk about voluntarily moving this into the historic district. And that would put further conditions on it if that were to happen, be it voluntary or not. And so I'm all for that. So I'm going to support this, moving forward with this, as long as we are able to put conditions on it moving forward.
I would like to maybe speak to the idea of the conditions and the concerns there. You know, when we do a general commercial rezoning, it does leave it open for a lot of things. And, you know, as we've all said, we trust Vincent Kari and what they have done and what they will do. But we are, part of this process is not just changing this for them, but forever. And what comes down the road, you know, maybe when all of us are no longer here, what does that open to that space? And so that's where my concern lies, is being able to protect the community from what Vincent Kari may not be thinking about, but the future may be thinking about. She's asking for an
Can I come up
opportunity.
and ask a question, add a comment?
Please.
So in regard to the yes or no vote for commercial, how is your process in terms of adding conditions? We are 100% open to conditional approval and applying those. I know that you can't recommend, but we can put them forward and say, yes, we don't want to turn this into a dry cleaners or an automotive facility or a manufacturing facility or anything in the future for even down the road when we're not here anymore and it does its own commercial.
What I would like to see is rewording your application for conditional commercial property is what I'd like to see. I know Mr. Clark was talking about PUD. I think internally we have to discuss with the planner if we can use the PUD process because of the multiple facets it allows. And then at that point, then we would have conditions on those uses also. But as a conditional commercial, I think we can do the same thing by putting restrictions on that, but we can't do that at this venue because that's not what was applied for.
Fair enough.
Can I interject here?
Sure.
So just to clarify some of the conditional rezoning versus rezoning that's been kind of thrown out, so to clarify some of that terminology. So a conditional rezoning is something that the applicant voluntarily puts forth in writing those conditions. So the applicant should submit in writing what conditions they're willing to put upon themselves as part of this rezoning. So they are required by law to be in writing and then submitted. Due to the way that the notice was advertised, rezoning is a rezoning. That you added conditions to it doesn't change the merit of that rezoning. And so the applicant needs to submit what those written conditions are, and then the Planning Commission know what those are prior to making that decision. Now that can be as simple as grabbing that piece of paper and reading those all out loud to clarify what that rezoning is. However, we cannot kind of take the PUD language and apply it specifically to this concept, because the PUD has a very specific process associated with it. And that was something that the applicant did talk about, was potentially explored, the biggest problem being the required size. So if we wanted to change that, that would be something that would require variance, or something that would require us to go through another text amendment to change that.
With the conditional zoning, that would move forward with future owners?
Correct. So conditional rezoning stay with the property. Those conditions stay with the property. Sometimes, not saying that the applicant should or shouldn't do this, but it's not uncommon that in conditional rezonings that applicants can offer up a time limit component associated with, if they don't take action in moving forward with it, it retrofits. That's something that the city of Lapeer did with their rezoning for their solar facility, is that if they didn't move forward with action of implementing their site plan, part of that conditional rezoning, that it would revert back to that single family. So there's some nuances associated with it, and the applicant does need to volunteer what those conditions are and present those in writing to make sure that everyone is clear on what's being talked about.
What would be the difference with what Mr. Rankine had brought up about the special use permit? What is?
So in our zoning ordinance, there are permitted uses and there are uses by special land uses. So in all of our zoning district requirements, that's specifically named what uses are special land uses. By law, it's required that all special land uses are specifically named in that district. So in the commercial district, the proposed uses as a banquet hall, a hotel, those are different facilities that are permitted in that commercial zoning district. So they wouldn't require a special land use. That's not something you just arbitrarily put on uses. It has to specifically be said in the zoning ordinance, this is a special land use in this said district. And just to clarify with the Planning Commission as well, when we have a rezoning that's not conditional, it does open it up to all the uses that are on that property, unless otherwise noted in conditions. So then the idea being, though, there are thresholds when different things don't come to the Planning Commission. If they're not changing physical attributes on the site, if it's not a special land use, that doesn't necessarily come to the Planning Commission for review. So not everything comes back to the Planning Commission. It depends on if you meet different thresholds in which they require a site plan. If they did a large parking lot expansion, or reformation sometimes triggers that coming back to the Planning Commission for a site plan review. But if they're not proposing a lot of different changes on different components that invoke that site plan review procedure, then they are not required to come back through this process.
So would a special use be something that could be done with it zoned the way it is?
Can you rephrase your question?
It sounds like your statement was, if it gets changed to commercial, the things that they are wanting to do are already in commercial. So those would not be special land use.
Correct.
But if it stays zoned R1 and you say special land use.
So the biggest issue is that in our R1B zoning district, it doesn't say those uses are allowed as a special land use. So you would have to do a text amendment to then put those uses as special land uses, which I don't think overall we want to have happen. For special land uses, they specifically have to be named. They cannot be interpreted in.
Great. That helps with that.
Yes, that helps.
You being the expert, what is the most effective way if, hypothetically, you wanted to grant this particular use but be able to have control of it down the road? What's the shortest path to that end goal?
All right, this is going to have a very long answer.
3 minutes, I'm setting my clock.
Yeah. The main two avenues that we specifically talked about is commercial, specifically some concerns of different nuisances or different concerns regarding the surrounding character being single family. It was recommended that they consider what conditions they may be interested in for that conditional rezoning for commercial if the applicant does decide to move forward in that direction. So those are permitted uses within that zoning district. So it's a quicker process to get up and moving, I guess is the least technical way to say that, as opposed to, which all the zoning ordinance requirements all apply if you're a PUD or if you're a site plan review, excluding that the PUD does provide some more flexibility in certain avenues as far as density and some different negotiation components that are specifically specified. But with the route of going for the PUD, they don't meet specifically the size requirement, that being the biggest component. So if they were to go to a variance to our Zoning Board of Appeals, that would be a very difficult argument to make because we purposely picked that parcel to be that size to be rezoned to be a PUD. So it would be an extremely difficult variance to achieve to meet all of their criterias. Now, I haven't heard it explained that way for criterias as far as not having to meet all of them.
I did not see that language, and I read it twice today.
So it talks about that all those require, or it doesn't specifically say the word all, so you are correct. But it does say that the approval is based on this criteria. So similar to when I look through other criteria, generally perceived is that you have to fulfill all the criteria, otherwise why is it a criteria? But I'm not questioning the attorney advice that you seek, I haven't heard it said that way. So that's kind of the PUD component. So potentially what was the option is that you could do a text amendment, but that takes generally 2 months because it's initiated, you have a public hearing, and then it goes to the city or the village commission or village council, sorry, to go through that approval process. So it is a longer time frame, assuming they don't take the hopscotch way through a variance to then go back to move through that process. So hopefully my long-winded answer kind of answered your question as part of that. And I did prepare a letter that kind of goes through the different standards, so I don't know at what point you would like me to go through that, to kind of walk everyone through that.
I don't understand your statement.
So I haven't talked about the rezoning criteria and kind of walked you through some of the different rationales. So at least before you vote, kind of going through that criteria.
Okay.
But a conditional commercial would be better. If you did.
I think it would be in some way able to address your concern.
Okay. There's our restrictions, conditions.
Okay.
On a piece of paper.
Gotcha. Perfect. Do you want to read these specifically out loud? Sure. Okay. Oops, you dropped the glove.
These are the conditions and restrictions that we came up quickly sitting here. The historic district would amend to join, take on the building. The hours of operation, which we talked about, and then eliminate the following principal use, which would carry on if the building was sold. And that we wouldn't allow an automobile, supply parts, accessories, laundromats, dry cleaners, mortuaries and funeral homes, new and used car lot, trailer sales, rental lots, gas station, drive-in, drive-through services, lumber yard, and medical marijuana dispensary. That's what we would propose.
Thank you. And Kari, those are taken from the list of items.
Right in the land usage language.
Those are for uses, but what about other concerns?
Like
noise abatement, things that would possibly require more screening than normal to keep noise from filtering into the neighborhood, things as far as restricting possibly outdoor venues to take place during evening hours.
Like, isn't the noise ordinance in the village 11 p.m.? That's
It is,
what we
yes.
would have to.
But, I guess I'm more concerned with things of the nature where the residents was talking about people just walking around the neighborhood and, from your event, and now we got 50 people outside walking around the neighborhoods and people are afraid to let their kids go outside.
Sure. I mean, we're in a downtown too. I mean, it's people walking to their cars, but I don't know how we would control or use the language to make that amendment, I guess.
Well, I agree we would need some thought process there. I don't know off the top of my head right now either.
Sure.
But, I mean, I'm looking at concerns of the citizens and,
We certainly don't let people wander around our venue now. They're in a contained area on the patio. But I don't see that as something that happens quite often. It'd be a unique, rare event.
Okay. Currently, do you allow alcohol walking around?
Walking around.
Someone's in the event and they decide to go outside and go for a neighborhood walk with the alcohol. In their
That's
hand.
against the law, so absolutely
I
not.
agree it
Yeah.
is, but I mean.
No, because we can be held accountable for that. The alcohol has to stay within the premises.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Will you also have your own security?
Something to consider. We haven't had to have our own security in the past. We always have managers on site, so I guess that counts as security. We're usually managing people and making sure they're not going places they're not supposed to go. So I guess the answer would be yes, but not like a security guard security personnel. There's always managers on site during events. They're not left to their own devices just to roam and wander. Anybody else?
I guess one other thing of the concern is the parking agreement. Like I said, I don't think it holds water.
Needs to go.
So I think we need to get with Mr. Walker, the Board of Education, to clarify that.
Okay.
And the name on there is also incorrect.
For?
Who the agreement's with.
Sure. I think that's just what the entity is under for now, or the building's in that name, but we can change it over to the.
Well, yeah, the agreement's with one place and your application's with another.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So as far, Jerry Walker, Village Manager. So as far as the parking agreement itself, I discussed that with Mr. Roper about his authority to sign, as I did previously with former Superintendent Noose. And because it's a day-to-day operation type of agreement, they feel that they did have that authority. So, but I mean, I'm not the arbiter of that, but that was the rationale behind it. It's very similar to my function as the village manager, where I have the ability, as long as it's not financial, to enter into day-to-day agreements for operations within the village.
Okay, and who accepts the responsibility and liability?
Well, the liability, regardless of who gives the authorization, falls with the property owner.
So the village accepts then responsibility for someone getting hurt on the school parking lot?
No, it is the school district. Whoever is the property owner of whatever property. If somebody gets hurt on my property at my residence, then I have some liability concerns there myself because I own the property.
I do want to add that every event, they are required to get an event liability insurance policy. So that also falls within, if somebody was hurt on that property, it could fall back on the hosts of the event, which was bridegroom or whomever is hosting the event.
All right.
Yeah, these are some additional conditions that can stay with the property. Noise abatement with the village ordinance, of course. Outdoor use, we can do hours of restriction, and then additional landscaping and perimeter. Sorry, Bob, I should have just had you come up here with me. And of course, we can work with the village police on security, and then we can clarify the parking agreement, and that could be part of the conditions of the zoning. You too.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask, I might have another question for you, Kari, is, in your application, you do not, list retail. And I know that that is one of the, things that's out in social media, is one of those things going on. Can you address that?
Retail would only be event related. A florist, a linen company, or somebody in that aspect of retail. That's the only thing that I could imagine would be retail there. I hadn't seen that out there. So, is there anything in particular retail that was?
The primitives that's there.
I would count that under as an event rather than retail, but I guess it would be a show or an event where people could purchase items.
But they wouldn't have a store in there?
No. Not that it's not. My vision would be wedding related retail or event related retail.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense.
The only reason that he's asking is, and I can't imagine you didn't see it, where they've been advertising that in February they'll be opening up there, they'll be opening a retail space in your building. And that quite frankly, it picked up a whole lot of chatter on the internet. In fact, somebody was said, well then, why is there even going to be a meeting, because it's rubber stamped if he can open up the business. So that, quite frankly, I mean, you had to have seen it.
I was under the impression that they want to do a spring show, not retail.
He said he would be in there next month, in February.
Oh, okay. No, I wasn't aware of that.
I saw it too. Only by appointment only. is
Oh,
what
I
he
see, I don't even
expressed
know.
to us. So if he has a client, he brings them over.
Yeah,
It's not open to the public.
He didn't
Specify.
express that.
Yeah.
He
Which
just said
would
he would be
still
open
be,
for business.
even if it's by client only, would still be retail.
Correct.
Gotcha. And I was not aware of that.
If that's something that's not allowed, then it's not allowed. We'd like to follow the
It's
rules,
just
so.
that, I'm looking at, that's one of the things that kind of stood out in your application.
Sure.
Kind of need clarification, so.
Absolutely. And I don't know if I want to completely restrict not having retail, but I'd have to look at how we restrict that. Obviously, said medical marijuana dispensary, but things that are appropriate to the existing business there. But no, that's not happening.
Yeah, quite frankly, that, I'll be very honest with you, that put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths.
Sure, I can see. Absolutely.
Because it hadn't even came here yet, and he was already announcing that he was open for business next month.
Sure. Absolutely. Anything else?
Okay. Thank you.
Do you want to say something?
No,
Okay.
okay.
Super.
If I'm not mistaken, we cannot change the application from commercial to restricted, or not restricted, but conditional.
So it was advertised as a rezoning. Even if it's conditional, it's still a rezoning to that district. So the applicant changed it to conditional by submitting in writing conditions.
Okay. So you have the document in writing?
Yep.
Okay.
Some of these are a little bit vague. So I would wonder how enforceable it would be as far as like additional landscaping, additional to what's existing. That might be something that should be a little bit clearer as we kind of deliberate with that. As far as
what I'd like to see is for this to be on a new agenda with things in writing so we can see it, and also so that, because what we got in our packet as the satellite view is basically black. I don't know if you know that or not.
I did not know that. The aerial?
Yes.
Oh,
What we got is almost a black blob.
Right here.
oh.
So,
It's also up here, so I tried.
so that we could more visualize where we would like additional screening to happen and what type.
Well, and I would warn you that this is something the applicant has to set forth what
I
type of
realize that.
screening and what the ratio is. So I think the way of mentioning you're worried about the transition associated with it going to residential, that you're worried about that sound carried. Landscaping is something you could see being potentially appropriate, but the applicant really needs to put forth what those specifically are. So it sounds like the term that you're trying to kind of come forward to is postponing this decision tonight, seeing that these are written up type maybe for those conditions. I don't know if you still want me to go through all the rezoning criteria, or if you'd prefer just to...
I don't think the rezoning criteria is necessary to go through. It was all written out. I think if we can...
Want a motion to postpone?
That's what I would like, but I don't know what the commission would like.
I can make the motion to postpone for clarified documentation.
I'll support.
Roll call, please.
Okonski,
Yes.
Christian,
Yes.
Lacey,
Yes.
Steele,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Goldsmith,
Yes.
DeSessa,
Yes.
Kinnaman.
Yes.
All right, so we will postpone, and do we say, if we get that early enough, we can then look at next month's meeting
Well, by postpone, it's
when they have ready, right?
condition is on.
Is
there.
it possible to request a special meeting to consider the
It is,
conditions?
as long as you request it.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. All right. Motion has passed to postpone until documentation. Thank you for everyone's patience.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Would we like to do while we still have public in the room, do a quick PA to our open house that's coming up next week?
Yeah, hurry up before they leave.
Hurry up.
Okay, so as part of our master plan update, we are doing another set of public engagement opportunities. The next one and our final major push for public engagement is our open house series, which will be happening on Wednesday, January 29th. We have a session starting at 2 o'clock, and it goes for 2 hours. Or no, yes. 1 hour?
1 to 3, 6 to 8.
3, 6 to 8.
Yeah, so 2 hours, 1 to 3. And then we also have an evening one that starts at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
6 to 8.
6 to 8. Thank you. So at that session, it's something that you can drop in for 15 minutes or hang out with us for the whole 2 hours. We have a series of 5 different boards where we're going to talk about different concepts such as our lakes. We have some different residential, commercial development topics that we, as a planning commission, have been working on and would like to see some input, help prioritize. Are these methods or strategies going to work on implementing it? Are they important to the community? We specifically are going to talk about sidewalks, some of our road quality components, so looking for your feedback on some of those different strategies and saying how important are sidewalks and working on that situation or that component. So we hope that you'll be able to join us for that event. Okay.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to, I think it would now be 9A, the consideration of zoning ordinance amendments, and then the amendments are listed thereof. It didn't sound like anybody was prepared to really read through those, so I guess I'd like to have that postponed till next meeting also.
I'd move that we postpone that.
Second.
Does that include the
This is for the accessory structures.
Just the accessory structures?
No, and also short-term rentals.
And short-term rentals, correct.
Okay, okay.
So we had a motion and support. Roll call, please.
Okonski,
Yes.
Christian,
Yes.
Lacey,
Yes.
Steele,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Goldsmith,
Yes.
DeSessa,
Yes.
Kinnaman.
Yes.
All right, moving on to what I'm gonna call, item number 10 with.
May I interject for a moment?
Sure.
Since we've been all sitting here since this time, could we have like a 10-minute break to kind of move?
Sure we can.
Can
Yes.
I would like to,
I point out real quick that we only got through half of this last time and it took 2 hours.
yes.
So we have 2 hours of material to get through tonight, and it's already almost 9. So it's up to you guys if you want to postpone or have a 10-minute break, and we'll just do a little bit. But I just wanted you guys to be aware of that.
I would rather have a 10-minute break so I can get up and move.
Well, yeah, he's asking,
And
are we gonna
then-
stay to, are we gonna do it tonight after our
Are we going
10-minute break?
over last times?
No, we're doing the next half.
Okay,
So we have
next
2 hours of material to go through.
I would like to have a 10-minute break and then go until a maximum of 9:30, and we'll stop there.
Okay.
Let's have a 10-minute break. It is now
That sounds great.
8:40.
Thank you.
Is it over?
I just went
Is it over?
today.
Oh, okay. I was
She
like,
was
oh man.
already going, okay.
Okay.
Oh, man. Thank you.
And then the other thing is,
See, I can't sit there that long on my back.
outdoor use. I have a big concern about that, but then when you look at, I live right across from the.
Yeah, I know, that's what my chiropractor told him today. I said,
Yep, you do, yep. But you know, they have bands in the field when the weather's appropriate. They have, the guys are out there drinking in the parking lot, you know, and everything.
You made the motion.
So, you know,
Yes,
I mean,
no.
this stuff happens. We've never, I've lived there for 39 years. We've never had an incident.
Let me grab my phone real quick.
Just, you know, it could happen at any venue, you know? So, I like what they're doing. I like what they're saying. But the zoning, I really have a problem with. I think they need to do their homework.
I always wonder who owned that movie. Hi, I'm Kym Carter.
That's my opinion.
My name is
I
Kym.
get the feeling they're pushing an event. They have an event already signed up. And they're pushing to get this done, so.
Developers always push.
Yeah.
They push and they push and they push, and if you respond to it, then you might see 9 months or a year of nothing.
Right.
Because they're not bound by what they said.
Well, I certainly feel that that's the case, that they got something,
That's why I said that, you know.
something in the oven there
I'm not
cooking.
seeing anything.
That's a good enough building. Certainly should be.
Yeah, I hate seeing it empty.
Because it is an old residential neighborhood, and you want to try to protect the
Right. Neighborhood office, consideration for that, or?
I didn't read through that to see, exactly what that is.
What did they decide about the going through the master plan tonight?
We're gonna go till 9:30 after the break. That's it. Our chairperson who had the job, has the job nobody else wanted.
You wise guys.
I was thinking you were the best at it. I just wanted you back in with it.
No, not yet, not
Wow,
yet.
that's a long time to be here.
If you move to Lexington or something, maybe then.
Oh, my goodness, right?
Yep.
Chris? Oh, what am I? You all right? Good.
Absolutely.
Got the signing guy over today.
So that is, so at that time, cases will be quarter and so that's where they'll take comments or suggestions from the community, and then they'll bring windows that stand out. That is the right place to talk about, hey, I think this area should be
That's nice. Clean. Yeah.
You can definitely tell when it looks hodgepodge when it doesn't match.
So I'd like to
Give me your hand so you don't fall over. They're selling my house.
No way.
It's too big. The cell's gonna be gone in 3 months. I don't know. I had my realtor friend out, and he loves my house. He said, I'll sell that thing in no time. So you better be ready.
Oh, we can? Okay, I didn't know that.
Put new appliances in everywhere. So I'll get 6 months use out of those. For me. Yeah, yeah. I'm looking at a small ranch. So, and it's around on Howard Street, in the back of the sun. Right behind Tom Clark. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's just that little street. In fact, I think it's the only house that faces on it.
It goes like this, like there's
I think you got 2 backyards and
yeah. That's the
it connects between Richard and Mary. So yeah, so I'm looking at that, but yeah, it's a giant, it's 4 bedrooms, 3 full beds, I don't need 2 living rooms.
After about 6, 7, 8 months later, you get a job for tested
So it's being updated.
I didn't know that, I couldn't do that, I thought I had to.
So I asked the question.
So yeah, I told you, you said hi and.
This week they're they're leveling the house.
Well, you said you didn't know.
So it's gonna be updated, that is going to be a non-building.
I remember celebrating that night at the Holly Hotel.
So I can watch your demo.
Yeah. Okay, we're still talking
I bet you can have a bridal party, I'll take the picture.
There you go.
As I was sharing with her, that's exactly how it
Kitchen and everything is now very secret. One of her questions
just a little time. So understands the whole process. And the so she's a person who helps Detroit Casino, teach them the process of how to save it, how they can donate it, how to package it after it's put on the buffet. So she said,
I mean, now, are you gonna be here on the 29th?
I am. I'm ready to go. I was working today, so
I was gonna be through the day, 1 to 3.
Okay. You got it covered now.
Yeah. Yes, that's why I have this right here, and I picked it up just so, even though I had it on my notes and everything. So it's just like, okay. But see, I had just started, and then I didn't know half of the stuff was going on, and I'm like, what?
See, you can't talk.
So we were just talking about. Hey, I didn't see the bylaws where it says that he can't be.
So we're going to do the donation bins.
Yep, I got some criteria on that.
And that was on the packet.
No, this is from Chief Narsh this morning from our meeting.
Oh, okay, well then he's got that too.
I've talked it over with Kym. No, we talked about it up there earlier about private public, the court order, because I took that court order to him, reviewed it, and then we talked about ways of loopholes of getting around, getting it central.
Because I'm always going through, and I'm going, no, I don't think that's what it is.
Responsibility on the property owner.
And I'm looking through, and so.
Applications. You had suggested that. Public property versus private property. Accountability for the property owner. Written permission from the property owner has to be documented and submitted to the village office. And the property, did you have that on there? Did you? And then placement of the structures conforming with the zoning ordinance or possibly accessory structure or dumpster placement, following that same context, that same line.
Yeah, I wake up at 4:30.
And it talks about placement like 9 foot from the property line, if it's 80 foot or more, or if it's 80 foot or less, it has to be 5 foot from the property line, just like the accessory structure.
We're working 6 days till. I actually had a tip this morning and yelled at my form. Got my point across. And it worked. Because I was right. The superintendent talked to me.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, we were not working. See you, Corey.
Testing.
All right, we're back working at 8:55. A little late. All right. Let's go ahead and bring the master plan update, goals and objectives to the table.
And we recommend, granted I was out of the room, so sorry about that. Just wanted to chase down the applicant. I guess I would recommend, because the goals and objectives, that's really not as pressing, I think, as some of the donation bin language that was prepared and provided in the packet to kind of get your feelers on some different components, to see if there's some other additional redrafting that we have to consider doing, as opposed to after we have the open house, that's where we're going to continue to talk about the goals and objectives, and based off of the open house say, is there anything else we wanted to change or sections we've already previously?
So do we need to change it from a consideration to a review of the text amendments?
So here's the, we figured out what happened as far as the text amendment components. So in your packet, you already have the shipping containers and short-term rentals text in your packets. Those were what was specifically put forward for the public hearing that was talked about in November. So those two topics, because we did hold the public hearing regarding those two topics, if you're comfortable, could move forward. Now, the intention wasn't to have the donation bid language as part of that public hearing, because you hadn't reviewed that component yet, but we do have 3 different text amendments going on at the same time, so I apologize a little bit for some of that confusion. It's up to the planning commission what you want to do, but those other 2 text amendments that are regarding the short-term rentals and the shipping containers, we've worked through that for quite a few months, looked at least 2 different drafts, so it's up to you if you feel comfortable moving that forward to village council. Oh, we did?
Yeah.
So
But
then,
a postponement can be pulled back.
you can revoke a motion, or what's the technical term?
If it's postponed, we can,
We make a new
we
motion.
can, we can make a new motion to
That's
call
true.
them back up.
That's true, yep. So it's at your pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
What would you like to do?
So what I'm getting at, or what you're saying is versus going to the master plan, skip that, look at the drafts that, for the donation bins, and get that part of it ironed out. What's the other commission?
I don't think the donation bins has very much to
shipping
do right
containers.
now.
Shipping
It's
containers
the shipping
and
containers and the short-term
term rentals.
that we postponed
From November.
from November, and repostponed them.
So,
Well, we postponed, they went
November
through
you can-
hearing,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we just did the hearing
yep,
and had
Mhm.
no comment.
right.
And now we can act on those, but we need to pull them out of postponement.
So moved.
Okay, I guess someone make a motion and then we'll have to then say
I'll make a motion
which
that-
items by section number that are not going to be
Which
considered.
items here?
I make a motion that we pull the containers text amendment and the short-term rental text amendment out of postponement back to the floor.
Support?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, so moved. Assuming you heard me. Okay. With that said then,
Which one you want to talk about first?
the first one up on the list is the Central Business District. Underneath for the special land use is the beginning of the article. Then we talked about the short-term rentals, when located above the first floor or first story of any structure. Other requirements, when this use is located in the CBD district, are listed below, and when there is a conflict in the regulations, the below provisions shall apply.
Looking through all this, that's-
And that then goes to item A, smoke detectors or fire alarms shall be physically connected to the use of the below floors, including the first floor, is what the action item really was in that. And then if I remember right, the other concerns are already in short-term rental uses anyhow, as far as documentation, signage, and things like that.
The same standards apply that you already passed in a previous.
Correct.
amendment.
So this is,
I'm sorry.
this is only for the, what's it called, central, or the
CBD.
downtown central business district, where the upstairs can be used as short-term rentals, versus there was no regulation on that. And so we added the amendment so that fire detection and alarms would have to be daisy chained to the building down below to warn the people up above.
Interconnected.
My only question, this is probably gonna be irritating, but the term shall be physically connected, are we talking hardwired?
Hardwired.
Because everything nowadays is.
I don't think we were saying hardwired.
Interconnected could be,
Because you get
like
those
Wi-Fi,
nest, you know, the
yes.
nest setups.
It could be the
for all Wi-Fi.
As long as it's an approved use, approved.
Okay, I just didn't know if the term physically was gonna restrict us to, you know, you have to have the actual wire, which
Does
puts
it
us
say
back in
physically?
It does say physically, maybe you should just say interconnected.
Yes, so we changed it from interconnected to physically connected, based off of deliberation that we had had due to the idea that you wanted to have a hard line. So if
Oh,
you want to
okay.
change that,
Okay.
so it's just interconnected, that's a fine change to make. But that would be what that, actually putting the word physical in there, that's what I would
I
take
thought
out.
that's what we agreed to,
That was my understanding as well.
and I believe that's what Chief said.
I know in the previous short-term rental discussion, it wasn't physical, so when we talked about the other districts, we were potentially gonna allow short-term rentals in there. So it was the idea that they would be interconnected, so daisy chained within a single-family home. That was acceptable, that's something easy for the safety component associated with it. I don't specifically recall at the meeting if Chief McGee specifically mentioned they have to be hardwired in a downtown setting. I know that the interconnected issue was addressed in the previous text amendment, but this is additional to that requirement to actually require it to be physical.
For
That
down,
was this
for the
amendment.
lofts downtown, or the rentals downtown.
So if you would like to make an amendment to that, you can still make that amendment and move it on if you're comfortable with it, but that was my understanding of the direction we were given.
I thought-
Jeremy, I'd have to ask you, and you wasn't here, the chief was, but from a practicality standpoint, to, hardwire smoke alarms and stuff in the downtown, in the CBD for short-term rentals in the second floor, what's the practicality of that? Would it
It's gonna be a challenge, and it's gonna be costly.
So as long as.
Interconnected, as long as the two speak together, is my definition of interconnected. Now, hardwired would be
Physically, correct.
physically. Interconnected would be that the two detectors or the detectors in that series have to talk to one another.
Wireless.
Because a lot of it's going wireless now.
Right.
anyway.
They communicate, that's all that matters.
I mean, you can do it through your
Current-
smartphone.
That's why
I remember right for fire code, current fire code for new construction requires them to be interconnected.
New construction, yes.
New construction,
It
correct.
has been for a long time, 70s, 80s, 60s.
And I think we were looking at that standard more because of where we're talking about downtown. And if I'm not mistaken, the interconnected, all right, is heavily reliable strictly on battery, even though they have a 10-year battery typically. So my personal preference was physically connected so that we were never relying on battery unless you had a power failure, which theoretically would be really rare.
Are you talking physically connected to the electrical system and the structure, or between the units?
Between the units, that they would.
Between the units and the downstairs
Wiring
resident.
between the units.
And
Which I
to
think
me,
is prohibitive in a 150-year-old building.
Well, as far as just practicality, I think we're moving backwards technologically. You know, it's nowadays, I just bought a set of fire alarms and everything is Wi-Fi, talks to,
As long as they talk.
they talk to one another. You know, I'm not saying I'm just.
And we have twice a year inspections on these,
Yes, that's what the ordinance calls for.
Yeah.
so twice a year, he's gonna go push the button on it anyway.
that was my desire. You guys, we're a group, we're not an individual.
As long as they talk to each other, that's the main thing.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi system seems to be state of the art.
Well, then someone make an amendment to amend the amended text.
And you can be just a consensus that you would like to, so, follow me here. So it's the idea that you have a consensus that you would like it to change to say, no longer say physically connected. We're
Well, if you
talking
drop
about just
physically and put in interconnected,
Correct.
that would work.
And I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure I can just remove that phrase because we already require that in where the other requirements are for short-term rentals. So that would just be covered. So I likely would just remove that. So as long as there's a consensus among the planning commission that you would like to see that revision, you don't necessarily have to have a separate motion for that revision that you'd like to see. Until you go to move it forward to the village council as revised, would be how you figure that in.
But you still have to say
First
connected
floor.
with the first floor.
Right.
Or downstairs floor.
Right,
So
so
you
the only
still
thing we're
need it in
changing
there.
is the word physically, and we're
Correct.
changing it to interconnected, but everything else, the language stays the same.
Okay.
Make it say
Yeah.
interconnected.
That works.
Interconnected.
Okay, so I believe there was at least 4, 5, 6, okay, 6 words. That's-
Everybody but me.
Are there any other changes to that?
No, everything else will look good to me.
So if anyone needs help, let me know.
So now we make a motion.
Well, no, the whole group, you need to go on to the next items, right?
You can do it as separate motions, or you can do it all together. I like them being separate, just so that it's a little bit cleaner, to know
All right,
these
so-
different actions. So entertaining something to the notion of making a motion to recommend the text amendment regarding short-term rentals in the CBD 1 district to be forwarded
Okay.
to the village council.
With revision.
With
second
as
that.
I second that, or third.
She can't make the motion.
Got a motion and a second.
Right.
Yes.
Motion and a second over there.
So
Second.
moved.
No, wait a minute, she can't make the motion. Someone here has to make the
He-
I
motion.
just
He
said
made-
so moved.
He said
Yeah, but you
so
have to
moved.
actually
He made it.
And then I made,
verbally make the,
Best practice
Second.
is for you to restate it.
yes.
okay.
Well,
I know you can
Do you want me to do that part
Yes.
then?
Yeah,
I'll
let's
do
do
that
that.
part. Okay, I make a motion that we accept the text amendments with the amendment to short-term rentals, section 157.076 in the central business district, to recommend that to council,
Village council. Yep.
okay?
Changing the word.
Yes,
With the revisions.
with the amendment to the amendment, text amendment,
Support.
yes.
Assessor.
Do we have to do a roll call on each one of these then? Okay. All in favor?
It was-
aye.
Any opposed? Nay.
When you did you just said much to the chagrin of the chair. So it
Okay,
goes in the text.
moving on, we're running out of time.
Yeah,
All right, so now we're at the area of section 157.008 definitions of donation bins.
And it is
No.
more than just
No.
definitions.
storage container.
Yes,
text
157.008 is storage container text amendment.
But it is a lot of those other subsections as well.
Yes.
So that's why it's a little bit easier, instead of reading off all the sections, it's just to say the text amendment for
Storage
storage
container.
containers.
Next page. There you go.
Storage container text.
It's the next page.
The donation thing.
That's just a draft.
Is discussion. We haven't got there yet.
Gotcha. So I have a harder opinion.
See, when I read through these, all these looked exactly what we talked about, so.
Right.
That's what I try to do.
So continue with your motions.
So I'll make a second motion here to move section 157.008 definitions for storage container text amendments to recommendation to the village council.
Support.
Hold on, that only covers the one standard of 157.008. We have 1, 2, 3, 4.
So that's why I say it's better to say the text amendment for storage containers.
And that encompasses.
The text amendment for storage containers.
As presented.
I would like to make a motion to recommend to council.
Support?
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passed.
So the other one that we talked is
Well, you got your amendment to your, site development standards,
it's all
all underneath that there.
said the whole thing,
Okay.
because it all has to do with storage containers. So now we get to go to donation bins.
Are you still feeling lively?
This one's not gonna take long tonight.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay.
So he's got 18 minutes.
And I'll get this one done in about 6.
All right. Hello, I'm Corey Christensen. I'm your other planning consultant. So this was drafted at the request of the commission in our November meeting. You guys wanted a text amendment for donation bins so that there could be some sort of control over donation bins in the village of Holly. Specific concerns were a licensing process or a permitting process. So that's what we drafted up. This was based off an ordinance passed in Ypsilanti because we found there was another ordinance that got into some state legislation issues because it was violating freedom of speech, I believe was the primary issue, because they were banning all donation bins. So we wanted to avoid any of those issues, and we went with a Ypsilanti ordinance as the basis. And so some things I wanted to bring up to you tonight are considering possibly passing this as a police power ordinance, which would be outside of the zoning ordinance. And the benefit of that is you wouldn't have any nonconformities because everyone would have to come into compliance immediately. If this was passed as a zoning ordinance, which is how it's drafted here, there would be grandfathered in donation bins. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up. And the other is that you should seriously consider having your municipal attorney review this. Any comments?
So tell me about the change that you're recommending. How do you put this in for the police?
So,
Talk about that.
police power ordinance is slightly different than your zoning ordinance. So different statutes come into play on when you work on a police power ordinance, which is adopted separately. The amendments we would be talking about as far as revising it is now it's a standalone document where you have the different licensing procedures. So think of your blight ordinance, your odor control, or not odor control, noise ordinance. Those are police power ordinances. So we should add some additional definitions. We need to add some severability clause, some additional legal jargon into that police power if it were to be standalone, as opposed to it being in a zoning ordinance. We already have some of those articles in place in our zoning ordinance that handle the legal stuff. So that's what we're kind of pointing out, is that if we would want to go towards that police power, because with zoning ordinances, there are statutory requirements regarding nonconformities. So if something was in place before there was a rule, you're a legal nonconformity. And you can't just have a sunset clause on those to now come into compliance. That's something, though, you can do in a police power ordinance, is to have that additional control where you don't have that nonconforming status attached with some of those units.
But anytime someone changed a donation bin, they would be then required to follow the new statute, even though they were just replacing an existing bin.
Right.
So what do we do to add?
I guess,
So
to
the
me,
Make it a police.
if you did police, then it would be uniform across the board. And then somebody like Jeremy wouldn't have to figure out whether they were grandfathered in or not grandfathered in. It'd just be a one standard.
And we
Correct.
do currently in the draft, we talk about when they, even if you're farther in the year process, we have one timer for when you need to renew. That way they're not trying to catch people with, like rental inspections. The situation is when someone leaves and somebody, or every year,
It's not
everyone's on a
rolling,
different,
it's-
I believe
right.
everyone's on a different clock.
Yep.
So this is trying to make it all a uniform clock, so that way it's a little bit easier to administer, because hopefully we're not having 200 of these pop up in the village.
We have a couple.
But we do have a couple, so it would be potentially easier to have, those uniform. There are a smaller fee associated with it because they generally aren't changing or different components such as that. So we tried to build some of that in there to help. But like think about your rental inspection ordinance and different, or rental ordinance. Those are different components that's why you potentially pull it out of the zoning ordinance to have it be standalone.
But then does that differentiate where Jeremy wouldn't be able to have any control of it? It would have to be actually a police officer.
I can still do enforcement on that, just as I can do with the noise and the blight and the other police powers.
We have it
Am I
written
correct?
that way too, so that the, I believe we have it, do you remember if it says village official or something, that vague title?
I will check.
It has some type of village staff or village position in which you can then allocate it out. I don't
So
believe-
Mr. Walker could go take care of it.
Yes, a
I don't-
designee of the village manager's office.
I don't believe I specifically say zoning administrator, more technical duty. I think we just talk about the village specifically official, just so then it is malleable as
Yeah,
far
I
as.
wondered why
who
that
goes.
It says zoning administrator.
I did? Okay.
It
then I
says
see
zoning
that.
administrator a lot, but then there's a point where I thought it looked like, okay, why did this change from zoning administrator to?
Revoke any permit, though.
I guess I'd rather go to the policing portion of it. They make it cleaner, easier. But I don't like the idea only if, so that we're not restricted to where a police officer would have to do it. As long as
Okay.
we can do it.
The
I have
term
that authority.
police, the
Okay.
term police power, is a more technical term than just that police officers have to enforce it.
Right.
It's just the legal jargon that they put on other ordinances that come from a different statutory authority.
Policed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it wouldn't say the zoning administrator, it would say
A
We can
design-
change that.
the
a
police
designee of the
power.
village manager office.
There you go.
All right. Okay.
I got a question, maybe I didn't see it in here, but how many of these donation bins am I allowed?
So we don't put a limit. Are you talking in the community as a whole, or are you talking per person?
Like if I'm XYZ church and I wanna put 20 bins out here.
So you have to
and I
apply
get-
separately for each bin. That's what we have in the ordinance. They would have to pay a separate fee. There'd be separate inspection, separate renewals for every single donation bin.
Are we gonna limit that?
But we don't have a cap suggested.
I think looking at this lawsuit, you'd have a hard time getting a limited number to stand up.
It just seems a little reckless to allow them unlimited. These bins are horrible to begin with. I see them every day, right at the end of my street. And
I think having a separate permitting process, separate fees, that alone will discourage having 20. They'll want to consolidate.
maybe.
Now, do they have to have the permission of the person that owns the property?
Yes, that's in there.
Now-
In writing.
Yep, they have to have written consent from the property
Now,
owner.
does that, when the property is sold, they have to move them out?
So during the
Unless,
When you get renewed every year,
okay,
you have to have permission from the property owner.
okay.
That's not a one and done every year, that gives a new permission.
Nope.
They
Correct.
do or they don't.
One-
Wait, I'm confused by the
correct.
question.
One, every year they have
Yeah,
to
that's
get
what I'm
new
saying, it's
permission.
not
Yep.
just one time and that's it, but every year they have to.
Yep, so every year, the zoning administrator as written, but that'll be changed. Whoever's reviewing it and approving it will be looking at the same application every year.
So do you know if this one has been challenged at all?
No.
I do know the planter that was in Ypsilanti Township, and I believe head there's a L, but I'd have to actually verify before I more concretely answer that question. And I haven't,
So
other
what,
than
was
knowing,
it challenged?
I thought it was,
Okay.
but I need to actually verify that.
Okay.
And I'm not aware, other than the St. John's case that we already kind of provided to you, I'm not as aware if there's any other legal components to it, so that's why we specifically said having the municipal attorney review it to verify that, that this is something that they feel like they can defend you in court. They're ultimately the one, especially once you change it to a police power, making sure that that's part of that component.
Are there any other questions for me on this? Any other changes?
So this consensus sounded like you were interested in changing it over to a police power. We can verify whatever the court case precedents were. Kind of again, I don't know at this point if you would recommend to staff to see that that is reviewed by the attorney at this point, or if you would prefer to wait for the next draft. I don't know. I don't want to speak for the staff as far as
I would say that we would want the police powers changed for sure, and then have
Right.
Gildner's office review it after we've had the second draft, and we're
Right.
happy with that second draft.
So bring the second draft back next month, and then we'll
Review that,
review that and request.
Gildner's office to review it.
Okay.
Just, for example, like the one sitting at the end of the Iatona's property. It's a large portion of the village apparently uses that as, a
Dumping
public
ground.
dumpster, yeah.
Yeah.
When that takes place, are the Iatonas themselves held liable, or is it whoever the entity is that?
So that's why we're creating this ordinance,
Yeah.
because there is no written permission from Mr. Iatona to
Right.
have those placed. Mr. Iatona wrote both companies. Katie and I went down to him and spoke about a week and a half ago. The one donation bin has been removed, but miraculously reappeared at Dollar Tree. So instead of two, it's just now one. But we are in communications with Dollar Tree to see if corporate gave them, the managers on site did not give permission, but trying to get somebody at the corporate level to give me an answer of whether or not they provided permission for them. That's where we're at right now. So that's why we're drafting this language, this ordinance, is to give me and the village powers to have enforcement on these and have a sets criteria for those applicants
That has to come through you.
come through our office.
Yes, okay.
So
For
there's
review.
no okay provided by the property owner.
So that's
They
where
don't have any recourse, they can just stay there?
So I talked to Chief Narsh this afternoon about that, and it talks about it being abandoned property on a private property. So the owner of the private property, Mr. Iatona in this scenario, has not given him permission. So it's abandoned property on his private property. So there is some civil things that he can do to have it removed. But with this ordinance here, it gives us the power to make sure that there's hoops that they have to jump through. First of all, they have to have written permission. And as you read through this 3-page document, you can see that it's pretty detailed extent on what they can and cannot do. It's gonna be a challenge for them, right?
With an exception.
They do have to provide a drawing as well, with setbacks and things of that nature. So it's not just an application.
You're,
held to that drawing, so if it mysteriously moves, they can be forced to move it back.
there's one area here that I guess could be challenged or an issue. I'm on page 3 of 3, looking at, what was I looking at? Where it was, I lost my spot. Basically, it was saying that the zoning administrator, where it's found that the permits are, revoked or whatever to get the box off the property, that within 10 days if it hasn't been removed, we have the power to go in and remove.
Yep, it's number
said-
2. It says number 2.
Right, remove said box, and then, at that point, you're able to charge the property owner for those costs.
the donation box at the expense of the permittee and/or real property owner.
All right, but what happens in the event the permittee, all right, just flies the coop, and the property owner revoked permission? By the way, this reason, now we're still gonna charge the property owner to remove it.
Yep.
Even though he said,
And that goes with anything with private property. I mean, you could use that same analogy for a blighted car. You had a tenant staying there, they left the car. Now you are the property owner, that's your responsibility to have that taken care of.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as that's the part of the responsibility of being the property owner. You did give them permission, they bailed on you, but you're still held accountable.
so you push it out in the street, and now it's not on your property.
Well, I'm sure there's some other issues with
I've got
that,
a
but,
fork truck and a dumpster, if you wanna deputize me anytime, just let me know.
Okay,
That's part of why we require the property owner to provide consent, because that way they're.
written documentation.
Yes.
That way they know what they're getting themselves.
what happens in the event someone puts something on his property and he didn't give consent?
It follows on that same abandoned property on private property, according to Chief Narsh. And I don't know a lot about that. I was just briefed on it this afternoon, but it sounds like it's a police power that can be handled through them.
Okay. Okay. I'm good with that, I guess.
I did have one comment on here, on page 2, letter D, donation bin requirements, item 1C. Donation boxes shall be serviced and emptied as needed, but at least every 30 days. I've seen some verbiage where a week, weekly monitoring of that. I've seen the one out here. I leave on Friday afternoon, I come back Monday morning, and it's overflowing. Like you said, it's a dumping ground, and now I have to wait 30 days, or I have to make a call, or they have to be back out that week to comply. Now, I will say that I have contacted a couple of them, and they have been out within 24 hours. I haven't had an issue there. However, it's just repetitive of the nature, so that's why we're having this ordinance.
Can we put something in there saying if
Maybe 2 weeks max instead of
If-
30 days? I think 30 days is a little long.
if container is full and the owner is notified they have 24 hours to empty it?
Or 48, maybe fair.
Okay.
I think that's
I
48
thi-
business, 48
I
hours
think
business
it's
days, or
easier on
2-day
the,
business days.
easier on the people not to have to come out every other week, but if they would get a call from the village saying it's full, to be responsible to get out there and get it.
I agree with that. Because I think that's where we're at right now. I mean, one night they're empty, the next day we come in and we're like, oh my goodness, somebody dropped off a truckload there. So I think gives us a little bit more enforcement with that.
So for my clarity, when I'm redrafting this, you want 48 hours compliance.
Or 2 business days.
2 business days.
I mean, if it happens on a Saturday night and I'm not here till Monday, I could see that could be a little
Yeah,
bit of a problem.
2 business days. Be fine. That gives us a little more control, I guess.
Yes, D1C. D1C.
Any other comments? All right, I'll bring this back next month.
All right, and we're almost 9:30, so,
I do have to present by law the 2019 Planning Commission Annual Report from last year. It was
Okay.
all in our packets there. I'm just going to make this real brief. I know we are on a short time, but I did make a mistake on there, and I apologize to Miss Lacy. I spelt it L-O-R-I and not L-A-U-R-I-E. So I apologize for that. But it's basically just talks about during the 2019, the Planning Commission met 11 times. I've been a liaison for, I think, 5 years now for this Planning Commission, and this is the first time I can say that we went 11 months. And we would have went 12 if we wouldn't have had quorum in December. So pretty impressive. Thank you for you guys and your support on that, for showing up. We conducted 3 public hearings and considered 11 separate requests for either site plan or amending the zoning ordinance. At the beginning of each meeting, we talked about the mission statement. In conclusion, I break down here each month what we went over in review. I'm not going to go through there and regurgitate that, but in the future here, moving forward, in 2020, the Planning Commission will continue to review the process of the Village of Holly zoning ordinances. This process has already begun with road services after being authorized by the Commission to conduct a review of the Village Holly Master Plan. As you all know, we've been pretty thick in that for about 8 months now. We're pretty close to getting that through. It's been a lot of hard work for everybody involved. Thanks to Roe and everybody's support with that as well. The reviews that are done and conducted will assist the Commission in determining the appropriate updates to the zoning ordinance, which would then will be recommended through staff to Village Council for authorization. So, and that just talks about today, we had 3 text amendments on there. So really a busy day, and I want to thank you guys for maintaining composure and listening to the public and doing the right things.
Thank you, Jeremy. Well done. All right, I guess with that said, we did set a cutoff time at 9:30. We will bypass the reporting at this point and commissioner and staff comments, and let's call this meeting adjourned. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh.
What?
Just a friendly reminder, I know I mentioned earlier, but we do have our open house next
Right
week.
here, open house.
I hope that you are all able to attend. We recommend if you can help us coordinate. You don't have to make both open houses. It's the same material, same boards. But we do ask that if you guys could coordinate amongst yourselves. Some of you come to the afternoon, some of you come to the evening, if that's possible. Just so then you can interact with the different members of the public. You've been a part of this process as much as we have. And hear them firsthand and talk over some of those concepts we talked about, our concerns, seeing what they interact with hand to hand. That is really helpful.
Oh, thank you.
On evening open houses, that sometimes can be kind of difficult to have. We're planning on having 3 staff members there to help facilitate different discussion or man the front desk.
I'll
But
do
having
the
you there
evening.
too. What?
I'll do the evening.
All right. So I've had some afternoons,
Copy
had
of
some
both.
evenings. Okay, perfect. It's helpful to have
Afternoon.
representation at both.
Evening.
Afternoon.
Evening.
And know that Katie Golden has worked on trying to bring some other things in
Yep.
to the building at that same time. One of the things she has arranged is for the Oakland County Clerk's Office to be here. So there are things that can happen with that, and I think she might have a few other things she's still trying to make happen, that build a day so that there's things that drive people to come, so.
Invite a neighbor, bring a friend. Unfortunately, I've had some other client emergency things pop up since we've established the date, so I'm unfortunately unable to make it. Corey will be at both of those open house sessions. Doug Piggott, some of you may have met him in previous years. And then we do have another row staff member that will be there. So I apologize, I won't be able to be there, but Judy does call in some other capacities that if I could, I would evaluate those. So.
Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned at 9:34.
I appreciate it.
I noticed everybody had a lot of stuff to look at and laughing and watching.